Hi, this presentation provides an overview of the San Mateo Union High School District evaluation system for certificated employees. You will need to be logged into your SMUHSD.org account in order to access the digital resources and documents referenced in the presentation. Certificated employees go through an evaluation cycle. This is the evaluation cycle that's noted in the Teacher Evaluation System Handbook. When employees are temporary or probationary, they're always going to be on a full evaluation. Once they've reached permanent status, they go through a 4-year cycle of evaluations. So here's an example of what the evaluation spreadsheet would look like. So we see that employees that have the letter F next to them are either probationary or temporary. So they're going to undergo a full evaluation. Employees with the number 2 are permanent status employees also going through a full evaluation. And employees with the number 4, they're going to go through an expedited evaluation. If we see a 1 or a 3, this means that it's an off-cycle year, which means they're not going to be evaluated. A broad overview of the evaluation system shows that it really goes through 3 phases. The first phase is about goal setting and selecting CSTP elements. Those are the California standards for the teacher profession. In the second phase is evidence collection. And finally, evaluators look at the evidence and assign ratings for evaluation purposes. This timeline shows broadly what the evaluation process looks like throughout the year. We begin in the fall with the goal setting and the initial conference. You go through a phase of evidence collection, and certificated employees submit their fall summary of evidence at the end of the fall semester. Evaluators prepare an interim evaluation report and provide it to certificated employees in mid-January. And then in spring, there's another cycle of evidence collection, another summary of evidence that's submitted, and then the final summative evaluation results are provided in the middle of May. These are important dates to remember. It's a good idea to mark these dates down on your calendar so that you can make sure that you are reminding the employees you're supporting through the evaluation process of important due dates. During the initial conference, you're going to review the SMART goal, you're going to review the selected CSTP elements, you're going to explain your next steps for scheduling observation, and you're going to remind them to link Form A, which is the CSTP reflection, and Form B, which is the SMART goal form, to their summary of evidence if they're working with an IC, or their professional growth plan if they're not working with an IC. The purpose of an instructional coach is to help the individual reflect on their practice and to capture evidence that's demonstrating growth towards SMART goals and to CSTP elements. It's important to remember that the relationship between an instructional coach and the teacher they're supporting is confidential, that they're not acting as an evaluator, and they're really there to help the teacher collect some evidence that shows they're making growth and progress. So an instructional coach will not share with evaluating administrators any information that hasn't been previously shared with the teacher. Instructional coaches are assigned by site administrators, and they're responsible for attending the initial conference, for helping the teacher create their SMART goal during the SMART goal setting cycle, for engaging in 2 coaching cycles in the fall semester, 2 coaching cycles in the spring semester, and they may attend the preliminary results conference in January if you choose to hold one. This is what an instructional coaching cycle can look like. There are typically 3 meetings in the cycle with the instructional coach. There's usually a pre-observation or activity planning meeting, followed by an observation or an inquiry activity, such as analysis of student work. And then finally, there's post-observation reflection, where the instructional coach and the teacher talk about what they've discovered and identify next steps. Evaluating administrators also collect evidence through scheduled observations in the fall and through unannounced or unscheduled observations in the spring. In the fall, evaluators need to conduct a scheduled 50-minute observation, and in the spring, administrators need to complete a total of 50 minutes of observations. They can certainly include a scheduled observation if they would like. A post-observation conference needs to occur within 5 days of the fall observation. It's considered a best practice to schedule both the observation and the post-observation conference meeting at the same time, so not too much time elapses between time at which the teacher has been observed and your opportunity to discuss what you saw. The summary of evidence document is completed by both the instructional coach and the evaluated teacher, and the instructional coach fills out the left-hand side of the document, and the teacher is going to fill out the right-hand side of the document. The questions or prompts that the teacher responds to depends on the type of work they've engaged with in their instructional coach. Teachers also need to make sure they review their summary of evidence to see if there's anything additional that they need to provide to show that they've been working towards the SMART goal or CSTP elements. In the fall, the summary of evidence should be turned in a week before the end of the fall semester, and in the spring, the due date is April 30th. The professional growth plan is very similar to the summary of evidence. However, the PGP is going to be filled out by the evaluatee and the evaluator, not an instructional coach. It's the evaluatee's responsibility to provide evidence and answer the reflective questions that are provided. And it's the evaluating administrator's responsibility to provide formative feedback based on observation. And just like the summary of evidence, the fall PGP is due a week before the end of the fall semester, and the spring PGP is due April 30th. So with respect to the summary of evidence, some best practices for administrators are to make sure you send reminders out to the evaluatees to submit the SOE and recommend a PDF file format. PDF file format is recommended because it's important that what gets uploaded into the HR drive represents a snapshot in time of what the SOE looked like when the evaluatee turned it in. Some evaluating administrators do like to ask their evaluatees to share their SOE in the form of a Google document because it allows them to comment on the document. And that's great. That's a wonderful way to provide feedback. However, you still want to make sure you have a PDF of the original SOE available to put into the Drive folder. Another important thing to note is that Google Drive gives you the option of adding a shortcut instead of uploading the entire document. If you upload the document using the shortcut feature, you must manually change the share permissions on anything that you're adding. If you go ahead and upload the entire document, the share permissions will be automatically changed for you. In the third phase, the evaluator is going to assign ratings based on the evidence that they've seen through observation and the SOE document or the PGP. So what gets rated? Progress toward the CSTP elements, progress towards the SMART goal, and Standard 6. It's important to remember that instructional coaches are supporting teachers on growth towards the CSTPs and the SMART goal, and not necessarily on Standard 6. So the rating categories are emerging, exploring, applying, integrating, and innovating. If you look at the CSTP continuum of practice rubrics, you can see descriptors for each one of those levels holistically for all of the CSTPs and at the sub-element level. The preliminary summative evaluation is due by January 15th. This is true for both those on a professional growth plan and those using a summary of evidence because they're working with an instructional coach. Although administrators have the option of holding a meeting to review these ratings, it's considered a best practice to hold an interim conference with all of your P1s and P2s. This is especially true for teachers who are newly hired to the district, as they're not entirely familiar with the evaluation process, and it's nice for them to be able to discuss your findings mid-year. Now, evaluatees may request that their instructional coach be present for a preliminary meeting, and it's generally considered a good idea because instructional coaches are often able to help the teacher who is on evaluation better understand the direction of the feedback and the evidence that's being requested, and it helps inform the cycle work for the spring. A final summative evaluation, an instructional coach is not going to be present for that, and that takes place no later than May 15th. The evaluatees do need to receive a copy of their summative evaluation results by the end of the school year. Be sure to use both the observation notes and the teacher's summary of evidence or professional growth plan to provide feedback on Form E. Form E is used both for the preliminary and the summative evaluations. You want to make sure that you've uploaded the PDF, the SOE or PGP, and a PDF of Form E with both the preliminary and the final results. Do make sure that you have a digital signature on the PDF. Although most of the presentation has focused on the full evaluation process, once every 4 years, a permanent employee will go through an expedited evaluation. A notable difference between an expedited evaluation and teachers going through the PGP is that there's not a mid-year feedback process. So at the beginning of the year, teachers on expedited create a SMART goal and some CSTPs, and they meet with the evaluating administrator. And at the end of the year, by April 30th, teachers on expedited, they submit a 1 to 3 page written reflection with the document's progress towards their SMART goal and a self-assessment around Standard 6 and the CSTPs. And evaluating administrators hold a final conference May 15th. So finally, some important notes about our teachers who are enrolled in the induction program. An induction teacher is one who's in the process of clearing their preliminary credential. They can choose any CSTP element to work on, but it's important to encourage the selection of CSTPs that's going to support their work as emerging teachers. Induction work can never be required to be presented for evaluation, but it's okay to encourage an induction teacher to have the same or similar goals for both induction and evaluation in order to decrease their workload. Instructional coaches working with induction teachers act as mentors, and this has a couple of implications. The biggest implication is that because induction needs to be separate from evaluation, the instructional coach will not be filling out very much on the left-hand side of the document. The other thing that mentors will do is they're going to facilitate what's called a triad meeting, oftentimes during the initial conference. This is an opportunity where the new teacher can ask administrators questions about school expectations, climate, culture, and anything that they may be wondering about or holding onto as they begin their career at their school site. On the final slide, here's a list of the resources and forums that we've talked about throughout the presentation. And these can also be found, the forms can also be found in the appendix of the Teacher Evaluation Handbook. Thanks for listening.